Okay, we're going to get started. So, a presentation about play, the power of play, I've called it. And it has kind of a serious title, don't you think? A crucial experience for children's development and learning. And you know what? Like, play is a crucial experience for children. Of course it is. But something so serious kind of takes away perhaps the essence of play. And on that note, I have to say, the first time I stepped into an early childhood classroom as an adult, which is quite a long time ago, it was during my teacher training. It must have been sort of 1988. So now you can figure out how old I am. Um, there was something about it that really enticed me. And I think that that's really what I sort of found my purpose. There was something about that play that was just so engaging, purposeful, focused, joyful. There were children um, building, creating things, interacting with each other, pretending. There was just so much going on. And like I said, I think, I've never looked back and I knew I found my place. But I think over the years, as I learned about play, studied play, went to conferences, read books about it, and so on, you kind of start to realize, it's a world of research, and the more you know about it, you realize that it is something that is incredibly rich and complex and so important for children and so beautiful, but also something that is quite complex. So what we're going to do today is thinking first of all about, what is play? And then from there, like as a connection, I guess, that idea of like, why is play actually important? And from there, we'll dip in a little bit into the how of play. How can we actually support this? So in order to do this, the first thing I'd like to do is go back to one of your own memories about play, because it is important, right, to kind of connect with our own understanding, our own memories, and so on, so that we can expand our theories, our ideas about play from there. And so that's sort of starting with that consciousness and that sense of where you're at in your thinking. Now, for me, and if I think about my own understanding of play and why it matters, I always go back to this quote here on the screen, which I think is incredibly powerful. That idea that we're built through play, but also that we're built to play. It's kind of part of our genetic makeup. It's what we're meant to do. If you think about very young children and the kind of playful way that they engage with the world, make sense of it, like a young child putting things in their mouths, touching, rolling around, that playful way of being in the world, we've come to know as play. And I really do believe, that it's those moments where we feel most alive, that's often sort of part of our memories, hey? Those moments of play that we never ever forget. So what I'd like you to do, and this is something that I love doing, and I do it all across the world, and every time I ask that question, people just start smiling. It's a beautiful thing. I wish I could see your faces while I'm asking this question. So what I'd like you to do in the chat, can you write down a memory of play? So have a think, right? Like, what's a memory of playing? Can you kind of describe, where that was and with whom and what you were doing? Because what you'll see is that across the world, people have kind of similar play memories. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. It's part of our common humanity, I'd say. So let's have a look. What are your play memories? Please put that in the chat box so that we can look at that and pull out a couple of reoccurring themes, let's say. Play memories. Making, creative thinking, inventing. It's kind of playing around with stuff, right? What other play memories do we see? Being with friends, yes. Being physical, stories, pretending, and the language and the interactions that come with that. Yeah, playing the sand, like play is often outdoors. It doesn't have to be, right? Often with others, but it doesn't have to be. It's often making, creating, kind of doing what's there. Yeah, a sense of freedom, perhaps. Hey, no parents who are watching. Yeah, being outside, there it is again. So connecting with nature, building a relationship with nature. Yeah, pretending. Sort of working through ideas, right? And working through things that have happened perhaps in our social cultural context, kind of working through ideas, taking on different roles, playing with things. Yeah, it can be anything, right? Mixing. Yes, I see that a lot. I hear that a lot. Beautiful memories, everyone. Lots and lots of memories. Yeah. So lots of connections. Have you noticed between those memories? Wonderful. Thank you for that. And like I said, I think often I notice that when people start sharing those memories, is that there are a lot of sort of through lines in terms of how they're connected across a different context, different times too, different generations, and so on, which is a wonderful thing. So now that we've connected with a memory, and the next thing that I'd like to do is kind of go to your own theories of play. Because I really see people and children as theory builders, as we're trying to make sense of the world. We're constantly trying to sort of like understand it, right? And it's often, particularly with children, that they're kind of fluid, temporary explanations. So we all have theories. So my wonder is, what is your theory of play? How would you define it? So the next thing that we're going to do is there's going to be a link in the chat box. And if you link on it, click on it, you'll go to a place where you can put in a couple of words that describe play for you. And what we're going to do is there's going to be a word cloud that will emerge from all the words that you're going to put in. And it's going to be interesting, I think, to see in this word cloud the words that are going to be bigger and the ones that are going to be smaller. And that's how we get a sense of your theories of play, so to say. So click on the link, start putting in 5 words that describe play for you, and then we'll look at the Mentimeter to see, how the word cloud is going to change, emerge, evolve as you're putting in those words. So let's see what happens. The words are starting to emerge. Have you noticed? So we'll give it a bit of time to see, which ones are going to stand out. This morning we had the word joy there. I see fun, joy. Yep, it is there. Initiated by children. Sense of freedom. Yes. Choice. That builds a sense of community. Exploration. Curiosity. Yeah, I think play is a space where we can enact our curiosities, don't you think? Building connections, making sense of something. Imagination. Ooh, that word's getting bigger. Play is learning. Yes. Music to my ears, of course. Possibility. Gorgeous. Growth. Discovery. Wonder. Yeah. sense of delight and wonder, uncertainty, surprise. It's all there, right? Just look at those words and you kind of start to realize how rich play really is. It's inclusive, it's brain work, it's exciting, you feel comfortable in it. It's development. It can be focused, but it can be silly. Wonderful. Okay, super. So what I'm going to do now is go back to the PowerPoint. And then what I'm going to do is share sort of my thinking about what play is and why it matters. So although play is a sort of slippery concept that is hard to define, what we do know is that it's incredibly important, hey, for the development of the brain, for cognitive development, for linguistic development, for social emotional development, for a sense of children's well-being. But it's a vitally important basic need, and it can really transform us. If you think about it, when a child is born, the brain still needs to develop further. It has to be built. And what happens through that interaction with the physical and social world, the child's brain is actually built. It's amazing. But not only that, right? Through play, children develop all kinds of understandings. They develop their bodies. They interact with others. They start to understand others. It adds to their sense of well-being. And through that, I think it literally transforms them. I also have a sense that through play, because it's such an agentic space, it's a space where we can make choices, where we can influence things, where we can enact on our passions and our curiosities, that it builds in us a sense of confidence. It builds our self-efficacy, so to say. So it builds our own sense of, what we can do, and that we believe in our ability to accomplish things. And I think if we have a very strong sense of self-efficacy, it also impacts on our sense of agency, right? So we're not thinking that things just kind of happen to us. We're actively participating and influencing our experiences. But like I said earlier, like the concept of play is very hard to define, and there is not really one consensus on how to define it. But if you look across the research, I think many people would say that play really is something that has to come from within. And that to some extent, it really is done for its own sake, right? And not particularly for its outcome. And what we often see when children immerse themselves in play is that there is a real deep sense of joy, a sort of immersion into this experience, very engaging, like some people might call that flow, right? And that's how it can be sustained, sometimes over a longer time, sometimes a shorter time, but it is kind of like a very focused, engaging experience. So yes, if you think about what play is and the many ways it can be defined and the many ways we can talk about it and all the words that are kind of out there, free play, structured play, guided play, playful learning, play-based learning, playfulness, the list goes on, right? Like you start to realize that it's a very sort of fluid, slippery concept. So one thing, and I always say to teams of people when they collaborate and start thinking about the way they think about learners and the way they think about learning, that it's also important to talk about, how do we view play and how would we define it so that at least educators together have a shared understanding of what play could look like in their context. And of course, that understanding is also evolving. But if you go to the research across many contexts and so on, and I think, there's a lot of consensus about, why play is important. There's no two ways about it, really, which is great. Hey, you always have to have the research up your sleeve when you talk with school leaders, policymakers, and so on, parents, of course, about the importance of play. And everything always goes back to the pivotal role that play plays in the development of children's in children's development, and not only sort of like very specific outcomes around academics, learning outcomes, but really a set of essential skills. So children's ability to collaborate, children's ability to communicate well. There it is, confidence. Hey, that sense of self-efficacy that impacts on your sense of agency. Um, and yes, the link to play and the development of what I would call creative thinking skills. So children's ability to generate ideas, to use their intuition, to imagine things, to kind of like be playful with kind of unexpected combinations between concepts, ideas, and so on. Children often do that while they're playing. And I'd say, and if we have that ability to generate ideas, if we can be creative in our thinking, the link to creative innovation is easily made. This is a photograph, actually, of some of my students. The last couple of years, I've also been a teacher of a group of children not far from where I live, in my hometown, The Hague, which has been such an amazing, delightful experience, to be back in the classroom and to work with a group of children and families and colleagues, of course. And I chose this image because it kind of reminded me of a quote, and you know what, I should know who said it or where I read it, but I just sort of don't have that available right now, but it kind of makes me think of this quote where someone said play is efficient. And I don't really want to take play into the world of work, or a kind of like honor it or value it for its efficiency, right? But I think what they were trying to say is that, when children play, all of that learning is happening all at the same time. And just looking at this image, you realize that these children are interacting, they're using their bodies, they're developing their fine motor skills, they're looking at beautiful things and picking them up. They're putting the marbles inside that toy. They're counting, making patterns. They're talking about it. They're negotiating. So it's social. It's cognitive. It's communication. It's self-regulation because we have to self-regulation because we have to take turns. Need to stay focused. It's all there. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Hey, we're kind of wired to do this. And through this, we develop this key set of skills that really help us to become self-regulated learners. I think some of the complexity around play lies, I think, not only in the way that we define it, but also in the way that we look at the degrees of choice that are available within play. So you're wondering, what makes her say that? But I guess the point that I want to make is really that, for something to be play or for someone to experience it as play is highly personal, of course. And, what is play for one person is not for another. But I think there needs to be a degree of autonomy. There needs to be a degree of choice within that experience, right? And that's why I chose this quote, because it kind of shows that also while children are playing, and as in this case, it would be sort of what maybe some people would call free play, this idea of children initiating, making choices, thinking about what they want to do with materials and with each other. It's the adult who observes, connects with children, and then through that careful observation makes a choice of how to interact with the child. And Vygotsky called that scaffolding children's learning. And that scaffold is really meant to support children so that next time they can do something by themselves. So, for example, children might be using paper and glue and some other materials. And then while you're observing and looking at the child, you may notice that the child doesn't really know how to cut yet. Yeah, like, and then the scaffold may be that you show the child how to scaffold. Now, this idea of scaffolding is something that adults can do, but often children also do with each other. And I think Vygotsky, when he talked about play, he said something along the lines of, when children play, their head bigger than themselves. Hey? So this idea that play really takes them into that zone of proximal development, that it is a sensitive zone when learning takes place. But for that to happen, there needs to be a degree of choice and a high degree of engagement. And often that engagement comes through play, particularly very young children who haven't developed their executive function skills fully yet. So their ability to focus and follow directions, to work with multiple ideas in mind, to persevere, that's something that you actually build through play. Very young children haven't developed that capacity to full extent yet. So that's why play is a wonderful place to learn, because that engagement is there, and engagement, as we know, leads to learning. So perhaps when you think about play in your context, think about it really as a range of initiated throughout the day. Think about a sort of continuum of adult-initiated learning experiences and child-initiated learning experiences, and then start thinking about, okay, what could that look like throughout the day, and what could that emphasis be, and so that there are moments where we expand choice, and there's a lot of choice, and maybe there's moments that we narrow choice, right? And it might be 4 choices, or like no choice at all, because at that point, we're all sitting together and this is a meeting, but maybe during that meeting, we're doing something playful. But thinking about it that way, I think, helps to make very informed decisions about what the day looks like based on what children need. Like I said, I think particularly very young children, but I guess probably, it's for everyone, hey? Not only children, but I'd say maybe teenagers and adults as well. We all show more self-regulated behaviors when we engage in something that is meaningful for us. When we can lead our learning to some extent. And that last point, I think, is important too. I think the wonderful thing about play is it really needs your involvement, right? But as we're playing and you're using your ideas and so on, I just came back from the Lego house here in Billund, and everything is there to play, but you've got to do something with these bricks, eh? It needs your ideas. But what happens is, the bricks, they need your ability. So there's a responsiveness in the materials. Now, here's a wonderful video from the Lego Foundation that we thought would be nice to show you, that kind of shows other characteristics of playful learning, but also gives you an opportunity to see some playful learning in action in some really beautiful schools.
So the world no longer rewards people for what they know. Instead, the reward is for what we can do with what we know. This is the new reality our children face. Life-changing technologies, jobs that haven't even been invented, and all sorts of challenges that we can't foresee. This means that what children learn and how they learn it must also change to look a lot more like the way we naturally learn, through play. But what does that look like in practice? Here are 5 characteristics of learning through play. Number 1, actively engaging. So coming up with ideas, or just learning something new, is much more likely when you're actively engaged. Does that mean to dance or to jump around? Well, it could, but it doesn't have to. It's more about becoming so involved, so invested in what you're doing, that learning happens naturally. Like when children solve a real-world problem that matters to them. As they brainstorm and conduct research interviews, they're immersing themselves in the subject. or when they demonstrate the same level of involvement with creative technologies. Taking a hands-on approach, building models, and getting immediate feedback when the models are tested, these children are focused, eager to explore and challenge themselves. Number 2, socially interactive. We can of course play and learn on our own, but when we share our ideas, something happens. We get the chance to see something from another perspective, to explain things, negotiate, and then reach a compromise. We learn to communicate and engage with others. Like these children. Their handyman needs more space for his tools, and the kids have decided to help. They're tackling a problem that's relevant to them and people they care about. To actually design and build a solution together requires successful social interaction. This is a way for children to practice the most important skill for future jobs, well, and life in general, being able to operate in a team. Number 3, iterative. Learning isn't always about being told how to do something correctly. Sometimes it takes a few mistakes to know how to progress. Keep trying and you'll get there in the end. This is textbook iterative learning. And here too, it's all about testing, changing something around, and then testing it again.
Make it a little lower.
Iteration strengthens critical thinking and reasoning. So it all leads to a deeper sense of what works and why. Number 4, joyful. Learning can often take a long time, and success can seem far away. Let's be honest, it's tough if you're not enjoying it. But it is a thrill to get somewhere. And as we get more involved, we chase that. Nothing spurs you on quite like the feeling you get as you're progressing. It's also about enjoying a task for its own sake. Joy is a huge motivation to continue learning. Number 5, meaningful. When a task makes sense to us and builds on what we know, when we truly care, learning becomes meaningful. These children are going to remember how they went about solving the handyman's problem because it meant something to them. Learning by solving real-life problems not only benefits them as individuals, but also their families, their school, their community, and the world. When you really grasp ideas, understand how they connect, and eventually apply them in new ways, this is learning at its deepest. The world of today and tomorrow is one of challenges, but also tremendous opportunity. Gaining knowledge is one important step. Really, children need a deep understanding that allows them to apply their knowledge to different situations and then spark new ideas. This takes practice. Let's give children a chance. Let's build on how children learn through play.
Such an amazing video. Every time I watch it, and like there's something else in it that I want to think about. Hey, so perhaps if you think about ways to develop a pedagogy around play in your school, it would be good to watch this video and talk about it together. Hey, and watch it a couple of times, because like I said, I think every time I look at it, I make new connections. And this time I was thinking about this idea of deep learning and application. And then, that could spark new ideas. And it kind of made me think that play really is a practice space, where you can actually practice some of those new ideas to see how they turn out. And that kind of takes me to the why. Remember at the beginning of this presentation, I said we're going to talk about the what, the why, and now the how of play. So yeah, sorry. What I should have said is that takes me to the how of play. Because yeah, like now that we've talked about what play is and why it is important, I thought it'd be nice to give you a little bit of insight in, how do I actually do this? So there it is. I think we have to make many decisions all the time, right, around really complex things like time. What kind of spaces, what kind of materials, how do we think about the interactions that we have with our students, with children in the school, and children interacting with each other? So how do we build relationships with children, children with children, but also children developing relationship with ideas, with materials, with spaces, and with other children, of course. So there's a lot to think about. But I really wanted to draw your attention particularly to this idea of an array, a range of play materials. Because like I said earlier, I think this idea of play being a practice space, play being a space where you can try things, often, that's a space where there are materials. Sorry. So materials are like in this quote that capture children's play and kind of encourage, what we would call play-based behaviors. So that might be trialing things, building, pretending, creating. And these materials are really, really powerful when they're easy to manipulate and when they give us that feedback. So that's that sense of responsiveness that I talked about earlier, so that the materials are responding to our ideas. But it's also nice then when the ideas can grow in complexity as we have a deeper understanding of what we'd like to express, or a deeper understanding of these materials and their properties and how we can use them. But what I like about materials too is when they're open-ended, they can be used in multiple play scenarios. Blocks can be used in pretend play, for building, for counting, for explaining a mathematical idea or a connection. So many materials can be used in many different ways, which is more sustainable, I would argue, but also kind of acknowledges and honors what play really is, right? That anything can be anything, really. So when you think about these materials, they often have like certain qualities. And I think one of them would really be this idea that materials need to be appealing visually. There is a cognitive and social dimension to learning, but there's definitely also an aesthetic dimension to learning. So the moment when you start selecting materials for their aesthetic qualities, what you'll see is that they really draw children in. And it doesn't mean that these materials have to be really expensive. Hey, there's such beauty in things that we find in nature, the color of these petals, for example, but we sort of sensitize to those qualities. And find things that are easy to manipulate. Look at these planks. I'm sure that everyone you could buy things like that children can use to build. And in this case, creating all kinds of ramps with all kinds of angles, that helped us to think about acceleration in many different ways. And this was an ongoing investigation with my group of students last year. We kept on thinking about this inside, outside, with different materials and so on. It became a very, very rich piece of research. And there it is again. There's that feedback piece. What happens, like even simple things like recyclable materials of things that we buy when we prepare food, like boxes and so on. The moment when we start sticking that together with a little bit of tape, maybe some blue tack, maybe some glue, we've got things to poke in it. All of a sudden, something happens. We start creating. And there it is again, that idea of complexity. Like even something as simple as watercolors has depth and complexity. If you think about also particularly young children, but also if you're not familiar with this material, you have to build a relationship with the brush and the movements and what happens when when we mix paint and water, and what happens when a certain movement has impact on the way this material interacts with the paper and so on. Highly complex, right? And a understanding that can deepen over time. And that's what we want, right? We want children also to engage with complexity, but we also want things to be able to kind of grow in a complexity as the understanding of the person that uses those materials deepens over time. And then last but not least, I've said it before, this idea that materials can be used for multiple play scenarios, and that perhaps things can move around in the room, and that children can enact on their ideas as they think of certain ideas of things that they want to build. So, for example, these tubes and these crates and so on were things that we found sometimes on the street, sometimes in secondhand stores. And yes, sometimes it's a house, sometimes it's a computer, sometimes it became a bus. But yeah, again, those materials are responding to children's ideas. So what I'm hoping is that through this presentation, you've kind of expanded your theory about play. Perhaps it has deepened, or perhaps you've seen and heard things that may sort of challenge your theory of what play is. And in order to be playful, what I'd like to invite you to do is, like I wrote in the description for this workshop, to take out those things that belong in your kitchen and see if you can represent what is your understanding of play at this point in time. Because what you'll notice is that those materials also help you to think about play. And to think more deeply about, okay, what is it that I now understand about play? And these are things that you can do with your students as well, right? Use loose parts like buttons or sticks, little toothpicks, anything really, and ask people to represent their understanding of something with these materials, and you'll see that you get these amazing results. So materials really help us think, and they help us, to be playful. So what I'm hoping is that through this presentation, you've learned more about how you can support your community, but also children with being playful. And I really hope that you'll stay playful as well. So good luck. Take care.